And one of the reasons that you're here today is to hear that we are very unhappy, I am, with Russia. But we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means. But today we're going to talk about something else. And as you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with Russia and Ukraine. And would like to see it end. It wasn't my war. It was Biden's war. It's not my war. I'm trying to get you out of it. And we want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is. That can be more simple. That's just the way it is. I hope we don't have to do it.
Will these be Patriot missiles specifically or Patriot batteries that you're planning?
Everything. It's everything. It's Patriots. It's all of them. It's a full complement with the batteries. You know. Say it?
How did you tell Putin this was coming?
I speak to him a lot about getting this thing done. And I always hang up and say, well, that was a nice phone call. And then missiles are launched into Kiev or some other city. And I said, it's strange. And after that happens 3 or 4 times, you say, the talk doesn't mean anything. My conversations with him are always very pleasant. I say, isn't that a very lovely conversation? And then the missiles go off that night. I go home, I tell the First Lady, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit. So it's like, look, he's, I don't want to say he's an assassin, but he's a tough guy. It's been proven over the years. He's fooled a lot of people. He fooled Bush. He fooled a lot of people. He fooled Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden. He didn't fool me. But what I do say is that at a certain point, ultimately talk doesn't talk. It's got to be action. It's got to be results. And I hope he does it. It's potentially such a great country to be wasting so many people on this and the money. And look at what's happened to his economy. Look at what's happened. So,
and with the threat in 50 days,
yeah,
the economy will be hit very hard.
I mean, look, I hope he's going to do it. He knows the deal. He knows what a fair deal is. If there is such a thing as a fair deal, there's no winners here. This is a loser. This is a loser. And I dealt with him from the beginning. And it wouldn't have happened, but I will say Ukraine was the apple of his eye. We talk about it. It was the apple of his eye, but it wasn't going to happen. And he understood that. It wasn't going to happen. And then I noticed, after I was out, soldiers forming at the border.
Yeah.
And then I heard horrible, stupid things being said from the other side. And I said, they're really handling it very, very wrong. It's a shame. Yeah.
Can I say one thing, and that is about President Trump, because you came in office in January. On the 12th of February, you had your first phone call with Putin. I think you did exactly what I hope you would do. That is breaking the deadlock, starting the conversation, because you have to test him. I know Putin very well from the days when I was Prime Minister in the Netherlands. You have to test him. And you did this, and you really gave him a chance to be serious, to get to the table, to start negotiations. Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, we all tried to help you. But you've now come to a point where you say, well, hey...
We actually thought we had probably 4 times a deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you were called and you said, this looks good.
Yeah.
And then the deal wouldn't happen because bombs would be thrown out that night and you'd say, we're not making any deals. It was like...
But you breaking the deadlock was crucial because you had to start that process. And you were the only one who was able to do that.
I think we'll get it done.
I've been in the presidential pool, a group of Russian journalists who cover activities of the Russian president and top officials, for 20 years. I have watched many of your trips. I remember the times when there were non-stop business trips to European countries and Russia's constant desire to interact and build relations with the West. At what point did we realize that these so-called partners of ours were not really our partners? It was clear from the early 2000s. Yet, we had illusions, I did too, which were about the following. Me and many others at that time believed that the problems in relations between the Soviet Union and the so-called West were primarily ideological differences. On one side, a communist regime, which was considered by many as tyranny, and on the other, the democratic world led by the United States. Strangely enough, I worked for almost 20 years in the Soviet Union's intelligence. I also thought that the main contradictions were of ideological nature. But the Soviet Union collapsed, there was no communist regime, yet the dismissive attitude towards the strategic interests of the Russian Federation remained, not just dismissive, but it was all tied to the clear desire to achieve geopolitical advantages. Moreover, even when I became president, I didn't understand everything right away. I began to urge my Western colleagues, look, you say one thing, but do another. Here is the proof. Then I presented this proof. They nodded and said, yes, we will sort it out now. And nothing happened. It was quite the opposite. It became obvious to me that ideology might have had some significance, but essentially, all these contradictions are based on geopolitical interests. That was the main thing. I mean, the Soviet Union performed an auto-da-fe. It dissolved itself. Partly, I think, I never discussed this with my predecessors. They believed that Russia would become part of the so-called civilized world. In the West, they decided the following: there is no Soviet Union. So why should we follow the rules concerning Russia, which does not possess the potential might that the Soviet Union had?
Думаю, я никогда не разговаривал на этот счет со своими предшественниками. Исходили из того, что Россия станет частью так называемого цивилизованного мира. Нет, на Западе решили. Но Советского Союза нет, что нам соблюдать правила в отношении России, которая не обладает такой потенциальной мощью, какой обладал Советский Союз. Но сейчас мы будем чик-чик там для себя что-то выкраивать так, как нам хочется. И будем жить по правилам, которые придумали сами для себя, игнорируя наши интересы.
Now we will carve out something for ourselves as we like and live by rules we invented for ourselves, ignoring our Russian interests. I will not go into details now, because we proposed a lot, in the field of strategic offensive arms, and in the field of missile defense. Everything was constantly rejected. Well, it became clear that until we assert ourselves as an independent sovereign power capable of defending our future, we will not be respected.
В недавние времена, когда мы у Запада как раз пытались копировать все, 90-е годы, многие вообще поклонялись практически.
In those relatively recent times when we tried to copy everything from the West, many worshipped the USA in 1990s. When you worked in the St. Petersburg administration, was it really the case that a senior American delegation flew to St. Petersburg, and one of the Americans either pushed or was rude to a Russian on the runway, and upon learning about this,
И вы, узнав об этом, отказались принимать эту делегацию в мэрии Санкт-Петербурга.
you refused to receive this delegation at St. Petersburg administration? Did that happen? I don't quite remember that. Honestly speaking. You know, maybe it was. Yes, I probably understand now what you're talking about. There was an incident. Honestly, it was insignificant. This American delegation did come to St. Petersburg, and someone from this delegation was very rude to a border guard. Yes, that's what happened. I was recalling whether it was a customs officer or a border guard. It was a border guard. I considered that absolutely unacceptable because a person in uniform, while performing his duties, represents the state, and treating him with disdain means treating our state with disdain. Of course, we didn't refuse to receive this delegation.
Принимать эту делегацию, с ней отработали как положено, все как.
We worked with them as planned according to protocol, but I simply didn't interact with them. Is it risky to let them understand you, friends, are behaving very hypocritically?
Ну, да, какой-то.
Well, yes, in some sense it is risky because Russia opposed those trends that were gaining momentum in the world at that time. By the way, I drafted my Munich speech while on the plane. While aboard, I looked at the draft that my colleagues prepared, put it aside, and rewrote everything from scratch. I did this not because we wanted to confront anyone and argue with them. No. Russia is a country that cannot live otherwise, and I considered it correct and timely to articulate our concerns. Moreover, you can trust me, I saw that the same concerns arose among many other international actors. But considering the global power of the United States, they kept quiet and held their tongues. But I reiterate, I didn't say it to argue with anyone or to put Russia against anyone. We simply cannot live otherwise. Russia will either be independent and sovereign, or will not exist at all. I wanted to convey this to our partners in the hope that they would hear and somehow adjust their attitude towards Russia, considering that, for instance, Since the 1990s, they promised us not to expand NATO to the east. They lied at every step, constantly deceiving and pretending that nothing of the kind happened. The same was true on many other issues. Therefore, it seemed to me that it was about time to tell our colleagues, we need to live peacefully. Let's somehow treat each other with respect, without imposing our will, without attempting to suppress others' will, considering the interests of all members of the international community. I don't know how effective it was, but since it's often remembered, it seems it was timely, that's what I want to say. But unfortunately, it was not heard. We constantly, I want to emphasize, constantly made attempts to establish relations that would not lead to the situation we face today and to develop some common rules.
С учетом интереса всех участников международного общения. Не знаю, насколько это было эффективно, но видите, поскольку часто вспоминают, видимо, это было все-таки своевременно, вот о чем я хочу сказать. Но, к сожалению, не было услышано. Мы предпринимали постоянные, хочу это подчеркнуть, постоянные попытки наладить отношения с тем, чтобы не довести до ситуации, в которой мы сегодня находимся, и выработать какие-то единые правила. И как только Иван IV, Иван Грозный, сказал «нет, мы останемся православными», сразу возникла легенда о том, что он жестокий тиран, что он вообще сумасшедший и так далее. Хотя никто не вспоминает в таком контексте о том, что творил.
As soon as Ivan IV, Ivan the Terrible, said, "No, we remain orthodox," a legend immediately arose that he was cruel, a tyrant, that he was insane, and so on. Although no one recalls what was done by Oliver Cromwell, what happened in England, in France in such a context. The Western history is silent about this. In any case, it does not give such evaluations that it was barbaric, uncivil. But they tried to subordinate Russia even then. In some former colonial empires, in Great Britain, in France, they consider us guilty for the collapse of their colonial empires. And this historical memory, historical negativity persists, I see it. Strangely enough, it sometimes makes me laugh when I see it. But I notice it in little things. I'm not making this up, I see it. But the fact is that after World War II, the United States, along with the Soviet Union, by the way, worked in some ways towards the destruction of these empires and worked to assist the colonies in gaining their independence and sovereignty.